Hi everybody, I'm Timothy Myers. I am the Sarah and Ernest Butler Principal Conductor and Artistic Advisor for Austin Opera, and I want to welcome you to this edition of Conductor Cues. This is a great conversation with a very special guest today, and I just wanted to let you know that we're really grateful for your support. We are excited about doing this production of Tosca for you at Coda, and we are doing absolutely everything we can with the strictest COVID protocols to keep everyone safe in this process. You'll see in this interview that David and I are sitting at a picnic table together at either end with a little bit of distance. We are also both fully vaccinated, and we are also, as all of the staff involved and artists and crew, orchestra, chorus, every single person involved with this production, tested regularly for COVID and also screened multiple times a day. So I hope you are all well where you are, and we are really excited to see you at Coda next weekend and enjoy this edition of Conductor Cues. Hi everybody, I'm Timothy Myers. I am the Sarah and Ernest Butler Principal Conductor and Artistic Advisor for Austin Opera. And I want to thank you for tuning into this edition of Conductor Cues based around our production of Tosca that's coming up at Coda Amphitheater next weekend. I'm really pleased to have a very special guest with me today, and that is the director of the production, the stage director of the production. He has been with Austin Opera before, most recently for La Traviata, is a wonderful colleague, and we've had a lot of fun putting this together. And I thought it would be really fun to just have a chat with him about the piece and this production and how we're doing it, the setting of it, and the differences in process of putting something together, not only during COVID, but also at an outdoor venue, a very large outdoor venue. So this is my guest. I'm really happy to have David Lefkowich with me.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, it's just great to work with you because this is our first time working together directly on a production.
Absolutely.
And I've heard about you for years and how great you are to work with.
And mutual, for sure.
Mostly true. So it's been really great, and it's been fun to dive in this process where there are a lot of challenges, but really challenges of the best kind.
Absolutely.
So Tosca's a piece that you're very familiar with. You're actually staging it from memory. Mm-hmm. So you know every single word and every single note beautifully.
Thank you.
So just give us a brief history of you and Tosca.
Well, Tosca is one of those operas, I love it. And I am an absolute fan, but I never watched the opera before I directed it for the first time. And I was hired by Boston Lyric Opera back in 2010 to do an updated production. And I wish I had watched it before because it turns out it has an incredible amount of passion, of drama, of intensity, but also challenges, as you said. It's not an easy piece. It doesn't just sort of direct itself. And so I will fully admit that first production, I was overwhelmed in a great way, in an artistic way. And I was thrilled with how the show ended up. But I realized that it, like every Puccini opera, it has its own tricky little moments, and if you don't sort of know how to navigate it, it becomes impossible. But when you do, it becomes this incredible evening of drama, especially Act 2, which is one of my most favorite acts to direct in all of opera.
Yes.
Where it starts to where it ends is such an incredible journey for these characters and for the emotions and for the audience, and so I love it. A few years later, I directed the show again at Mill City Summer Opera, which was a company I started back in Minnesota. Mm-hmm. And this was an outdoor venue that has an 80-foot wide space.
Yeah.
And so it really made us think out of the box. We had to think about, okay, well, we're starting the show in the daytime, so there's no blackouts at the end of acts,
right.
Or at least at the end of Act 1. There's no curtain that comes in at the end of Act 1. But we have a whole group of people on stage
right.
that need to go off stage at some point. So all of a sudden, all of the sort of previous expectations that I had from being in the theater were different. But again, it made me look at the piece and go, okay, well, what's important? What's integral here? What do we need to have for the story to make sense? So that was a really fun production and very exciting. The audience was very close, and again, it was an updated version of the show. I took that production around to several different places, and then I was thrilled when Austin Opera called me and they said, okay, we know you've done this updated production, but we're so excited for you to do a traditional Tosca. And I was too, because I've never done it. And I just thought, there's all these conventions in there that I have adjusted for the time period.
Right.
But what happens when we go back to the original source material, the original time, and do it? But then, of course, things changed, and COVID happened, and we had to pivot. And when the decision was made to go from the Long Center to Coda, we saw the space, and I just thought, there's no way we can have people traipsing about in these period costumes and expect the audience to buy into it.
Sure.
You know, I mean, we get that opera happens in a different time period, but Coda's space is so modern. It has this ultra-modern feeling to it, and it just didn't feel right. And I thought, okay, well, maybe it's time to trot out the 1940s Tosca again, because at least it felt a little bit more 20th century. The costumes fit a little bit more with the venue, and the space is something that, okay, I may not have directed at Coda before, but I recognize this sort of layout from my time in the past. And so I was just so thrilled to have this opportunity to come back after the pandemic and direct a show that is so close to my heart in a production that I really love and have worked on for so long. It just felt like the best of all possible worlds coming together, even amongst a really difficult situation.
Yeah. Well, we're really glad you're here. I also want to just make a disclaimer that I need to make. We're sitting here at Austin Beer Works, which is next to the rehearsal studio, and so
but no beer.
We're great. Yes, it's noon, so we haven't started that yet. But I did want to let you know that we are sitting apart, and both of us are fully vaccinated, and we are being frequently tested for COVID every 3 days here at Austin Opera. So everyone involved in the production, we have very strict health protocols. We're screened every time we come to rehearsal, including when you come back after a break, you're screened again. So anyway, I just wanted to let people know that. You know, I love how this is happening. First of all, we have a terrific cast.
Oh my gosh, they're amazing.
LaTonya Moore, Adam Smith, Alexei Bogdanov, just a terrific trio to anchor this piece. And it's also been really great. You mentioned that when we originally engaged you to do Tosca, it was at the Long Center, and it was on quite a traditional set. And it's been great to move to a different venue, because I think in a way that's also enabled us to strip away a lot of other things that go along with Tosca. One of the things that happens with Puccini operas is there are just these traditions that have developed over the years. And we could have a whole conversation about that and the pros and the cons. A lot of them are cons, in my opinion, because I think when you really get to know the pieces of Puccini, if you really do it how it's written, he is such an incredible dramatist.
Yes.
He's an incredible orchestrator. And the way that he's able to combine all those things is really spectacular. And so I have to say, with you and this cast, it's been really rewarding to come in, and we're really approaching it very freshly and looking at some of these things like, oh, it's traditionally a little slower here, a little this or a little that, and kind of taking it down to bare bones in more of a way than I think might have happened if we were doing a very traditional production in the Long Center, right? It's sort of like everything has gone away. We're working in this big venue, and it's very interesting. You'll see when you come to Coda for the show, when we work at the Long Center, there's structure there, right?
Yes.
There are communication systems in place. There are already, wires run everywhere, and all
Lights
of
in the sky.
Yes, exactly. All of this infrastructure that we're used to having in a traditional proscenium theater, well, none of that exists at Coda unless you bring it. So one of the really special things that people are going to experience is an environment that we've created from nothing.
Absolutely.
And I'm really excited for people to see that and hear that. And I think Tosca lends itself very well to this kind of environment, right? There's something, well, tell us a little bit about Tosca and just the setting, right? The traditional setting, its actual time and place, right?
So we have, usually with Tosca, we of course, start off in the church, then we move to the Palazzo Farnese, at Scarpia's study or office, and then, of course, we go to the Castel San Angelo for the rooftop. But the great thing about Tosca is that regardless of the time period you set it in, unless it's sometime way in the future or very early in the past, these three locations still exist today.
Right.
So we don't really have to change much by updating it, which is very helpful in this case.
Right.
We're not trying to rewrite the story. We're just trying to reframe it.
Yeah, and by the way, just something on that, there is a great book called Tosca's Rome.
Oh, it's fantastic.
If for opera fans who are interested, it's great. It talks about these real locations and a lot of the history that was going on in Rome at that time. So an interesting look at Tosca that's a pretty easy read.
And they have a map that actually takes you from the different locations, so
Right.
you can in real time sort of experience what it would have been like for Tosca to leave the Palazzo Farnese and go to the Castel San Angelo. You could actually do that in real time, and
Right.
also pretty exciting. But
And this also happens within a stipulated time frame, right? Tosca does. So tell us a little bit about, there are a lot of operas that happen in very specific time frames. I mean, part of Bohème does, right? Things like that. But tell us how that functions with Tosca.
what I love about it is that, yeah, it all happens within just over a day's worth of time. I mean, we start the show sort of right at dawn or pre-dawn, and Angelotti's first sort of exciting entrance. He's been running basically all night trying to escape Scarpia and his henchmen, and he runs into the church. And once he has hidden himself away, we see the sacristan coming in, sort of going about his morning chores. And it feels like such morning music, like happy, everything is going to be okay, we say today. It's not, unfortunately, but we like to at least give gives a moment that we think it's going to be great. And then as the day progresses, as the first act progresses, we literally move from daytime into nighttime. And they talk about in Act 1 how later this evening we'll be, serving this cantata and singing for, the king and the queen. And so Act 2 just tracks later that night, and then Act 3 is sort of almost 24 hours later. We're in the middle of the night, and again in this pre-dawn sort of time period, so that the very end of the show sort of happens as the sun is creeping over the horizon. So I like to say we end at night, we begin at night, we end at night, but we have a very, very full 24 hours
Right.
that we experience.
Yeah. And I think the way that you've said it and the way that we've structured it also very interesting in that where the start time that we've established actually is partially to do with when the sun sets.
Well, we thought, okay, we're outdoors, and we can't start the show at 9 p.m. or it'll be a very late evening for everybody. But the opera was written for daytime hours beforehand. So it actually works great for Act 1 to happen in the daytime and Acts 2 and 3 to happen in the nighttime. We sort of let the sun do the heavy lifting with our lighting. And what that means for us is that we can have that daytime feeling, but as the Te Deum, the really exciting end to Act 1 happens, that's when we have our sunset. And then Act 2 and Act 3 happen again in nighttime. So we're taking advantage of our situation instead
Right.
of letting it take advantage of us.
Which is one of the great things about a site-specific production like this, is where you can really harness the venue in a way. And there's something also, speaking about architecture in Tosca, that Coda itself is very architecturally unique.
Absolutely.
Right? The giant tower that comes off the back of the amphitheater, and the fact that we are in the middle of America's only Formula One speedway. So there are a lot of really unique things, and I'm really excited for the audience to experience this. I want to pivot a little bit and just talk about COVID and just have a little chat as artists about what that has been like. And I'm curious, I think everyone's aware really of the halt of public performances and the fact that for artists, it's been a really hard time. That's, doing those kind of things is the bulk of the income for most artists. And
Absolutely.
so there have been a lot of these terrific challenges to surmount. But I'm curious to hear your thoughts on what it's like coming back out of it now, because I think we're really aware of. Well, not really. We're acutely aware, and I think all of our viewers are. But tell us about what it feels like to be coming back,
Sure.
doing a production, and has it changed the way you view opera or the way you view art? Or I'd like to hear your thoughts about this.
Well, I have to say, first, a year ago, right before COVID sort of really on the scene, I was actually directing Tosca in Oregon. And we made it to the final dress rehearsal, and I remember watching the final dress rehearsal, and then looking at my phone and seeing these updates and going, seems, uh-oh. And then asking the artistic director of the company, will we be opening the show? And they said, absolutely, shouldn't be a problem. And then the next day, everything closed.
Right.
So, on a personal note, stepping back into Tosca a year and a month later, there's this very surreal feeling of like, I know I've directed this before, and I've seen these scenes play out before, and yet it never had an audience. So I almost feel like I'm in this sort of loop where I just keep directing, and maybe one day people will get to see it.
Right.
And I will absolutely be honest, I found the first month of COVID, I was like, well, this is novel and different and shocking and horrible, but it wasn't personal yet. And then it changed. As with that happened to all the artists, our schedules changed and our contracts were canceled, and there was what was once a very full several years worth of work became a very empty calendar, and I had very little to do. And I remember people saying, well, isn't that such a nice thing to have a few days of vacation? And no, it's not, in fact. It turns out...
We don't get paid when we don't work.
We don't get paid, but also for me, I never realized this, but my life is spent creating opera.
Right.
That's what I do. And to not have that focus and that purpose, there was several months of just feeling, I don't know what to do. And many, many hours of sort of watching television, which was very new for me, and taking walks, again, very new for me, and running, which that was good. But and so when this opportunity came, I assumed this contract would get canceled, to be totally honest.
Sure.
And I thought, okay, well, this will be one of the list. But it sort of held on. And I'm friends with some members of the company, and they said, no, we're going to do it. I thought, yeah, sure, okay. But I remember this moment when, and maybe it was in October or November, we had this meeting, and the Austin Opera said, it doesn't matter if we have to present this in a parking lot. We are going to make Tosca happen safely and beautifully, and you are going to be involved. And I cried. I don't know if I cried literally on that phone call, but I remember getting off the phone and feeling so emotional at the opportunity to have this live experience again. It is so important to me to create art and to be able to tell stories that are relevant and exciting for our audience today. And I guess I took that for granted for a few years.
Sure.
So this was a real opportunity to look at this situation and go, what do I love about opera? Why do I direct opera? Why is this my passion?
Yes.
Why am I working on a 500-year-old art form? And what do I have to say to it now, especially a year later when everyone has suffered so much? And I did a lot of thinking, because again, I had a lot of time and I ran out of television shows to watch. So I really did some thinking, and I thought, what I love about opera is not a lot of the tradition, as you said, and a lot of the things from the past. But I love these stories. They are universal in their appeal. They don't just appeal to an audience of several hundred years ago, but they still can appeal to today's audience.
Right.
But how?
Right.
How do we make it relevant and exciting to today's audience? So what was exciting was once we pivoted and we turned it into a more modern production, it gave us a chance to get rid of the once upon a time, long ago feeling.
Sure.
And set it at a time that maybe I wasn't alive for World War II, but my family was. I know people directly who were involved in that war.
Right.
So it's more relevant. It's a touch point for the audience. This is something they know and they recognize. So the drama isn't something we can just go, oh, it's a pretty story happening, but it's actually something that we know and could have happened to someone that we knew or part of our own family. And that became exciting. That's a reason to come out of your home right now and see a show.
Right.
You're not just going to be entertained. I mean, that's the expectation. You have to have great entertainment, great conducting, great singing, great drama. But now, it's personal. It's an opportunity for you to see yourself on the stage or see someone you know on that stage going through something difficult, going through a challenging time. It's something we can relate to. And I think making opera relevant and relatable is a way for this art form to survive long after all of us are gone. And that's what we need to do now. Opera for the last 500 years has remained relatively the same. So this year, this pause, gives us an opportunity for all of us to step back and say, what is opera going to be for the next 500 years? And I want to be a part of the next 500 years, as well as the last 500, but really what's coming up is exciting. And I also think that we've allowed ourselves to relax our grip on what opera is supposed to be.
Right.
Because now we don't know what it's supposed to be. Now it's just what we want it to be.
Yeah, that's a very interesting point that I love, because typically, when you're trying to innovate in a sustaining enterprise that we could call the art form of opera, it's very hard to innovate because you're always pushing against resistance of existing core product. And that can be challenging. People really like the traditional canon for good reason. I mean, these are really, really brilliant
Terrific
pieces.
yeah.
And we adore them too. But as you say, it's our responsibility to also be looking forward. And so it's been interesting, really, when the core product became completely unavailable. And in fact, illegal for us to produce, right?
Exactly.
Because we couldn't gather enough people to even rehearse something, much less present it. And the creativity that has imbued internationally, and the asking of questions that we really needed to be asking, and that we were forced to not only ask but begin to answer in a number of weeks.
Yes.
Not years, but really almost immediately in these kind of pivots. And so, I know we've all enjoyed doing digital product, and we've enjoyed connecting with our patrons in that way and staying close with them, and I think in a lot of ways even having the opportunity to reach some new audiences occasionally. One of the things that I realized early on was, like you, I missed the craft. Like just not being in a rehearsal room. I love conducting performances. It's very rewarding, especially when they go really well. But I love the craft. I'm about craft. I love being in rehearsals, there making decisions, talking with the director and the singers and saying, okay, how do we want to do this? Like, this is ours to make. And so I've really missed that. And the other thing that really hit me big time was how much we are a provider of community.
Oh, yes.
And I think that's something that hadn't really landed for me as solidly as it did a year ago.
The responsibility that we have was not as clear as it is now.
That's exactly right. And to your point about Austin Opera forging ahead in this, is Annie Burridge, our wonderful general director and CEO, led a really key conversation late in 2020. And because we were talking about this all-star concert that we were planning, that we've now filmed for PBS release that will be coming out soon, and doing Tosca and how it was going to happen. And it came down to, why are we doing this?
Absolutely.
Why? Because it's a risk, right? There's some level of risk. We're doing, and I don't mean just health-wise, but with what's happening in the world, and could things be closed down or limited again? And so there's so many moving parts here that it's hard to wrap your head around. But really what it came down to as a senior staff, when we all were really honest about it, is we said, we're doing this because we have to.
Absolutely.
Because we believe that we are servants to the art form and to our community, and we're going to do everything possible. And I have to say, it's, Annie's leadership and also the board being solidly behind it has really made it, for us as a staff, incredible. Just to feel that support and leadership, and to be able to go into it. And as you can see, it's very different than what we thought it was going to be, because we're all sitting here wearing a lot of layers, and it's May in Austin.
We're freezing.
And it's cold. And I'm wearing every single layer that I packed, because I thought it was going to be summery and nice, and so I was going to, break in some summer clothes, and no.
Well, luckily next week it will be warmer for the
Yes.
show, so luckily this weather is really holding off very nicely.
We're suffering through this for you. So
Exactly.
We expect to see you at Coda. But no, this is a really exciting thing to be doing.
I agree.
I'm
When we
excited
look
for
around-
people to hear it and see it.
When we look around the rest of the country and the rest of the world, people are really starting to prepare for live performances again. But Austin Opera is on the forefront. Someone had to lead the charge. And so it feels great that not only are we artistically being bold and taking risks, but that we have a company that's willing to back us up and sort of lead the charge into the future. And I think it's a lot of bravery on the part of everybody here, and it's incredibly impressive that we would be willing to do this safely with the audience in mind, with our cast in mind, with our performers. It just has felt the whole time that we are the whole company is sort of holding us in their hands, getting ready to let us fly, but in the best possible way. And I just feel very privileged. My next live show is not for another, I think 4 months from now. So again, this is never something, I direct 6 to 8 shows a year, every year for the last, 15 years.
Right,
and for the first time that wasn't there, I took it for granted. It is amazing to have this chance. And that in a week, we talked about this in rehearsal yesterday, actually, that in a week we're going to present this piece to people who haven't seen a live performance in over a year.
Yeah.
And they get to see Tosca, one of the best operas ever. So it just feels like we're all focused now in the right direction, and we're going to create something magical.
Yeah, I agree, and I'm excited to be back to it. I'm personally a little unsure of the emotions I'm going to feel in conducting these performances. I'm sure there are going to be some things that I'm not expecting.
And you're going to be in the view of everyone.
Well, that's true. Yeah, I should tell you a little bit about the physicality of the production. So it's a huge stage as far as width and depth, but the orchestra is on stage, and distanced, so we have a very specifically designed stage with things spread out. All the players are 6 feet apart. The string players will all still wear masks because they're able to do that and play. But yes, visually it's going to be quite a feast. And I've never conducted an opera before where it was also on a jumbotron on either side of the stage, so that's pretty cool.
I love that one moment in rehearsal that, I actually mentioned to Tim that, at this moment, maybe turn around and give them the cue because you'll be in the picture too. But it's a great opportunity. Usually the orchestra and the conductor are in the pit and sort of hidden away from view. But this is one of the parts of opera that makes opera so exciting, is we have all these instrumentalists and musicians creating together. So I'm really pleased when we look at the show and we say, all of the performers are here together, distanced, safe, but we're all in it together. And that's very unique.
It is unique, and something that some of our patrons have heard me say before is the thing that I love most about live performance is that I truly believe that it's a miracle.
Yeah.
Because there is a group of people from all different backgrounds, all different families of origin, even countries of origin, all come together to do something that in a lot of ways is very sacred, right? We have this duty to interpret Puccini and to do the piece justice. But it's a miracle in the sense that when we're actually performing, we're creating moments that have never existed before and will never exist again.
Absolutely.
We could do Vici d'arte and go back to the top and do it again, and it would be very, very different. And I think that's one of the things that's exciting about live performance. And so if you don't have your tickets yet, you need to go to austinopera.org. They're selling very quickly, so I would recommend doing it very, very soon if you haven't already taken care of that. And please be sure to join us for this really, really special, and it's not hyperbole to say this epic event, right?
Truly
epic on all the scales. I want to thank David Lefkowich for joining me for this conversation on Conductor Cues, and this is going to be amazing. Sincerely, this is not something you want to miss, and we look forward to seeing you at Coda next week. Thanks, David.
Thanks so much.